This episode is brought to you by SteelRoot, a national leader in helping companies meet cybersecurity compliance requirements and prepare for CMMC. Their experienced team of engineers and consultants assist organizations of all sizes to implement and manage IT systems that meet the technical requirements in DFARS and CMMC. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of 123 CMMC. My name is Dana Mantilia, and I am your host. And today we have a very lovely guest, Sarah Spencer. And Sarah is the CEO of Solentech. So, Sarah, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your company?
Hi, Dana. Thank you for having me. Solentech was founded because of the struggle that enterprises and governments and healthcare have with cybersecurity. And we started out as a cybersecurity service provider, and we pivoted to a software provider. So we're developing a compliance management and continuous monitoring platform with a top-down approach for CEOs, the board level, and then it does get deeper into analysis for IT folks and those cyber analysis folks.
Well, that's good that you started at the top, because if they're not buying into it at the top, it's going nowhere. So that's great.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? CMMC, access control, registration and deregistration. So this is a good topic to cover. So here's our first question. So explain the difference between the different levels of access control between level 1 and level 5.
So I like to always start with access control and identity access management because it is the first level of defense, especially when we're dispersed over several different cloud platforms and on-prem platforms and applications. And when we think about level 1, we should really be thinking about establishing those policies and those processes and how we navigate access control so that it's a continuous life cycle. We're improving over time. And by the time we get to level 3 and 5, we have some automation in place that can help us monitor these types of things.
That's good, yeah, because obviously it gets a lot tougher moving up the ranks here. All right, so then who needs access control for 1, 2, 3?
All companies need access control. And when I go into smaller companies, they struggle with this because they're like, oh, I don't have time. It's another process. I don't want to have to, authenticate for every time, doing the text authentication or the push notification. So everybody needs access control. And for the DoD, only 15 contracts this year will have CMMC in it, but all government contractors will be expected to have at least a level 1. And then obviously, if you're dealing with PUI and more confidential or restricted or secret information, you need to get up to those levels 4 and 5. So it's really up to you to go through those kind of documents that you have and determine whether you do have PUI in your environment that you do want to be level 3. But everybody should have that basic level 1 foundation.
Yeah, and what I always like to mention too is not only putting the policies together, but this stuff takes a while to implement. And this has to be, ingratiated into everybody so that everybody is following them, and you've checked that they're following them, and you have some proof that they're following them. So
we've got to get away from that check the box audit that, hey, once a year we do this, circus show, and then again for a year. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm having a little bit of a hard time hearing you, so maybe you could talk a little louder. I never have a problem talking loud because I'm a loud talker. So
I do get soft sometimes.
There you go. All right. If someone is starting to implement this process from ground zero, which I think a lot of these companies are going to be doing, so how would they start to implement access control?
Start establishing, like you said, those policies and those processes, and make sure you know what your policies and processes are. So when you first start out, they may be informal, verbal, things that you know how to do, but it's really important, even if you're a small company and you're regulating yourself, or maybe a small team of 4 people, to create those policies and processes on paper and then start implementing them. So start with the policies. And a lot of people want to bypass the policies because it is a lot of work. And this stuff doesn't happen overnight. Larger corporations with millions of devices, it takes 3 to 5 years to get 80 processes or controls in place. And we're saying 80 is the minimum to be at a high mature level security. So you do want to start with the user awareness and training and those policies. Formal processes, like on paper, you're doing registration and deregistration manually. It's important to know how you're doing it.
Yeah, that's one thing too. I mean, you hire somebody new, and if there isn't a written policy or procedure that everyone's following, maybe everybody's already doing their own thing, and then this new person, it's left to their own demise. Whatever they think is appropriate is what they're going to wind up doing, and that's not good.
Exactly. It's good for setting that culture, for forming that culture. So when employees come to me, I always say, what does the policy say? And they say, I don't know. I didn't read the policy. We'll go back and read the policy and then come back to me and let's have a conversation. And that gets those employees in the habit of looking at the policy when they have a question.
And everyone needs to remember too, when these assessors come in, they can ask employees, what kind of training have you had? What's the policy for this? And if they're not getting the right answers, that's not good. So that's definitely got to start with, everybody getting on board with, let's establish some ground rules here and then, build upon them. So, all right, so let's see here. So how does this evolve over time to get to the higher levels?
So again, you're going to get better as you go. You're going to get better at what you're doing. You're going to understand your controls better. You're going to be reviewing them daily once you get to level 5. So even if it takes 5 years for DoD to implement this for everybody, you should start now because it very well could take you 5 years to get good at this. So you do want to realize that you have to crawl before you walk and that you will get better at doing it over time. And it'll just become second nature.
Yeah, and then the other thing is if you wait, and then you have an active contract you want to bid on, and then you're trying to rush, and somebody comes in and does an assessment, and you don't pass in time to get awarded that contract. That's not only you're not getting the contract, now you have to pay for them to come back again too. So this is definitely, we can't beat this into everybody's head hard enough that they need to get started on this, soon. So that way it's something that's not so overwhelming. Because if you wait till the end, this is just it's gonna be too overwhelming for somebody that's not doing anything. So they may just bow out, and that's what we don't want. We don't want some of these, subcontractors to be saying, "Oh goodness, I can't do this." Well, yeah, you can. We just need to, take it a little at a time and start early. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So, what are the different capabilities for access control and levels as they relate to? Let's see, what does it say? C001, establish system access requirements.
So when we're establishing system access requirements or user access requirements, when we think of access control, we tend to think of users, but we want to be conscious that security starts at the very beginning of implementing a tool, of designing a platform or software. That this includes applications, services, processes, and users. So we want to identify what those are early on. And sometimes we're going to have these things already implemented and we have to go back. And it's a tedious process, especially when we have, lots of system to system communication and we're not really sure how these systems work. That's when you may need a consultant to come in that knows Azure, Microsoft, or whatever systems you're using.
Yeah, that's a good point. And then knowing, like you just said, if you're using this system over here and somebody's using this system over here, and how do you suggest that they go about starting to kind of create like an inventory of this stuff? The new Department of Defense's cybersecurity program, CMMC, can be very confusing and overwhelming. A3 is a cloud-based collaborative environment for an organization seeking certification. A3 builds CMMC packages and has access to a marketplace of consultants, RPOs, and assessor C3PAOs. A3 creates a roadmap for each cybersecurity requirement and helps break things down step by step. Please visit cyberdataintelligence.com/A3.
Yeah, so I would start with their users and their user accounts and see what they need access to. So if it's temporary accounts, is there a way that those temporary accounts are removed when that contractor or that consultant or employee leaves, that we're disabling those or removing those accounts? Our routers are authenticating. And so if you're a small company, right, you're not going to authenticate with TACACS necessarily, but you could do it manually with your MAC addresses. But we want to make sure that those routers, those firewalls, those systems are also authenticating. So start to create that asset inventory, who the owner of the asset is. Who do I go to if the asset is broke or there's a security attack? How does that, because the worst thing is, right, somebody just comes in and plugs something into your environment and you don't know. And with access control, we're preventing that.
Mm-hmm. No, that's really good. And then, that you touched on the temporary users. That's something very important to make sure you have a policy for. How does a temporary person get access, right? And then when they're done, who's verifying that the access has been, taken away? Because sometimes somebody comes in, they get access, and somebody gets busy. There's no specific procedure for it. So these people have access forever and ever just because no one's looking. And that's an important thing to keep an eye on. Okay.
Enforcement, those are those logical policies that enforce what somebody is allowed to access or not allowed to access, using groups and roles to do that and control matrices.
Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of this is just good business, right? We really should know who's in the system, who's not in the system, who should be, who shouldn't be, that kind of thing. Okay, so this one is C002, control internal system access.
Okay, so that's what I already sort of talked.
Yeah. I think we did just talk about that one. Okay, here, remote. This is a good one. So control remote system access. A lot of people wondering about this.
So we're all working from home, and companies had to struggle to get access for their employees. And a lot of small companies I've gone into recently said, our employees work on their personal laptops and we don't have control of their personal laptops. And some of the things that I suggest is making sure that you allow only certain security postures to your environment. So at Solentech, we have logical policies. If I have employees working on their own devices, if their device doesn't have antivirus, my system won't let them on. Or if their system isn't patched, my system won't let them on. So it forces them to do personal hygiene on those personal devices. That's one way to handle that. Giving them free tools to secure their personal laptops. And then the most important is remembering that VPN access, that encryption, site-to-site encryption. Because the worst thing is they're working on their laptop and they don't know that some bad actor already has access to their laptop or is sniffing the wireless network, and maybe they're working at Starbucks. And now those passwords and those credentials are being, sent over in plain text.
No, that's a very, very good point. And, we all kind of got thrown into it real quick too, with the shutdown and everything. So there are a lot of risks out there with people working from home initially. We're definitely all getting a lot better though when it comes to that stuff. But I like that software that you have on there, that if the device that the person is trying to log in doesn't have antivirus or doesn't do the patches, that it can't. That's really good. That's excellent, because that's a big protection level there. Good. Okay. So we're going to limit data access to authorized users and processes. Are we limiting data access?
Yeah, and a lot of companies, they don't think the data is important, or they say, I'm just a small contractor, nobody cares about me. But these bad actors, we call them advanced persistent threats, and these are, other nation state actors that are very sophisticated. They may want a contact, an email, because they're island hopping. So they're using the smaller contracts to get to the information that they really want. And so it's important to never think that nobody would want your information or you're too small. You're easy pickings for the bad guys.
So can you explain to us a little bit for those in the audience that don't understand, what does island hopping mean?
So island hopping would be when I infiltrate like a smaller contractor that doesn't have security controls that maybe Lockheed Martin would have. But I know that this small contractor is a subcontractor of Lockheed Martin. And so I'm attempting to island hop from this contractor to this contractor until I get to the person or the system at Lockheed Martin that I'm looking for. Or in a larger company, I'm using trajectory points to pivot through their network. So I may enter in one place because it was easy, but now I'm able to gather that reconnaissance information about other systems and how they're connected, and I'm able to pivot through the network.
And I think this is something very, very important for the small companies that don't think that they're of any importance to anything for that exact reason. Because the bad guys also know that too. They know that the small guys probably don't have the best security. They don't think that they're a target. So they do exactly what you just walked us through. So thank you for explaining that. All right, here. So can a company do this by themselves, or should they hire a consultant?
You know, companies can do it by themselves, and they certainly should learn how to do this and how to maintain it. But I'm finding that smaller companies and even mid-sized and enterprises are overwhelmed by all of this, and they don't know what they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important to take all of these factors. And I just read an article where a small business was quoted $150,000 for a CMMC level 3 assessment. So you don't want to spend $20,000, $50,000 for an assessment just to find that you don't have the controls implemented properly. So it's important to take all of these into consideration and hire somebody that knows how to implement these and can see things that maybe you're not thinking about.
And I also think a consultant, such as yourself, would be somebody that would be able to go in and explain to them, give them a roadmap. Like, okay, we know you're overwhelmed. You have no idea where to start. So here, this is what we're going to do. Step 1, step 2, and then it's digestible. You know, it's like how to eat an elephant, one bite at a time, right? Not that anybody wants to eat an elephant, but we all know that old saying. So yeah, that's a very good point. And I think, you know, maybe they could get started on their own a little bit, and then they could maybe bring in a consultant, or maybe they could bring in a consultant that can, you know, work with them. It all depends on their budget. That's really what this is going to come down to. And also their, you know, how much they can get this into the culture of the company. If they have a bunch of people that are like, yes, we want to do this, it's going to be a lot easier than a lot of naysayers that are like, oh, why are we doing this? We don't need to do this. Nobody wants our information anyway. So anyway, so that's,
have a weekly engagement with you and train you on how to do it yourself and how to maintain it. And, you know, make sure that you're seeing how we do it in the enterprise so you get some experience in doing it.
Yep. And it's just like a habit. How do you get into it? You get a habit by redoing it, repeating it. So,
and leadership has to be on board. I cannot stress enough. If you have a CEO that says, I hate multi-factor authentication, why do I have to change my password? More than likely, the entire culture is that way. Mm-hmm. So it's for leadership to eat their own dog food and, you know, walk the walk, not just talk the talk.
Yep, absolutely. That's for sure. Starting at the top, just like your software does. That's fantastic. So is there anything else you want to throw out there before we wrap it up?
It's only a solution if it's a secure solution. So that's it.
That's a very good point. Well, thank you, Sarah, very, very much for your time. We appreciate all your great information. That was very, very helpful. And thank you, everybody, for watching. We appreciate that. And we will see you hopefully on the next episode. Stay tuned. Bye-bye. This episode is brought to you by SteelRoot, a national leader in helping companies meet cybersecurity compliance requirements and prepare for CMMC. Their experienced team of engineers and consultants assist organizations of all sizes to implement and manage IT systems that meet the technical requirements in DFARS and CMMC.